Hi, welcome back to CS170 spring session. I'm just going to do an extra video on some questions that have come up just to reinforce some concepts around some of the stuff that we covered for lecture this week. So what do we cover this week that some people are asking about? Concept of if, and, it could be also or not. And you also have absolute relative. Okay, so this is like conditional stuff. This is like being able to combine a couple conditions, let's say, and then this absolute and relative reference is basically saying whether when you copy a formula, whether you're going to copy and adjust accordingly. Let's say I was referring to this B column. If I was referring to B5 and I copy a formula with relative reference, let's say I go down to the next one, it'll know to go to B6. Okay, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so these are important concepts. It's going to be on your exam. It's going to be on your homework assignment. So do try to understand these concepts and let me know if you still don't understand after this video. Okay, and then I set up like a date here. This is going to be something I'm going to use to demonstrate the absolute reference. Okay, so let's say I did this. Let's say I did the if. And remember, we did the if, or just like any other function, if I type it, you automatically get this, right? So let's say I click on that. And right away, you can see it tells you, well, it's going to do a logical test. And then what happens if it's true? And then what happens if it's false? Okay, so what do you want to do? All right, so let's say I'm going to say if student ID is greater than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I put a comma, and you can see it actually moves over to the next thing that it has to do, right? Which is say, what's the value if it's true? If it's true, I know I've been, keep on using my example to say true or false. So let me just say something else. So let me just say T, and then let me say F. Okay. Oops. All right, what happened here? Let's go comma. Okay. So stupid mistake on my part. I didn't put those in there, the quotes in there, but you can see the comparison, right? So the B5, which is this cell, B and 5, is greater than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So now watch what happens when I copy this down. Now remember, I can do a control, I can do a copy paste, or I can do control CV. But let me do, see, you can do the copy here, and then you can just paste it down, right? But I'm gonna do the drag and fill it, and it will be true, right? But look at this. You can see the formula, the cell changed to B6. And then likewise, if I go to this one, you can see it changed to B7. So this is what I mean when I make a relative cell reference. These are all cells here, obviously, right? So B5, B6, B7. If I don't put any dollar signs in there, that means I'm making a relative cell reference. Okay, so that's what this is doing. So this is a demonstration of me using the if statement, and it's also covering using a relative cell reference. Okay, now let me try to use the and. I think I did this in the video, but I'll do it again. All right, so here, now if I want to do multiple things, right? So let's say I do and notice how it came up with the hint for you again. Right now you can put in multiple logical conditions. I happen to only be using 2, but you could do more than 2, right? So the first one is going to be this B5 greater than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now my second one, I want it to be north. And I close it off. Okay, so what did I do here? I put the and then I've checked two things now. Okay, actually, I only put it north here. I didn't actually compare it to anything. So that's not right. So I actually need to say D5. Okay, so okay, so I drag it down. Okay, so let's look at this. Well, number one, you can see again, I copied the formulas down because it's using relative cell reference. So now it's B6 and D6 as opposed to B5, D5, right? So B5, D5, I copied the formula down and it's now referring to B6, D6 automatically, okay? But the other thing to notice is because I use the and both things I'm checking are good, then it becomes true, right? Or T, which is what I'm putting it here, right? And then likewise over here, it's true before because it was checking against this B7, but when you go against this, it's not equal to north, so that's why it's false, okay? So hopefully you kind of get the idea of using the if statement and also using the and here, right? Now you can imagine if I did a or, right? I just replaced this and with an or. I can do that. And that will work. And then I will take this and I drag it down like so. Okay, so I'm using the or statement instead of the and, okay? So this is how you combine multiple checks in your if statement. You use like the and or the or. Then not all that, all not means is it just kind of flips it from whatever it is, right? So you can say, well, not west, which means anything other than west, okay? So now let me go to absolute reference here. Let's say I want to do something like I want to compare this date, 1/1/1990, against these date of births here. So let's do that. So equals if, and then let's see, my logical test. So if this date is greater than this date, I will say CR. And then if not, then it's FA. Okay, so this is fine, right? So you can see that 513 is not greater than January 1990. So that's why it fails. Now, look what happens when I copy this down. Okay, so here you can see it went to C6, which is fine. Now, but what's F3? Well, F3 is this. Okay, so this is essentially going to mark it as true. Okay, but that's not what you want. You really want it to compare against this, right? So how do I make that happen? Well, I'm going to go to the $F $2. I'm going to make a $F $2, $F $2. By me putting the dollar signs in front of them, that locks up the column and the row, and that's why it's called absolute reference. Okay, so that obviously works. And then I'm gonna copy this down like so. Okay, and it just so happens, well, let me comment first. Well, so you can see F2 stayed the same. F2 stayed the same, even though this kept on moving, right? So this kept on moving, which is right because you're using relative cell reference. But anything that used the dollar is an absolute reference, it stayed there. Okay, so that's important for you to know. So this is how I was able to compare against this thing with this. So this kept on moving, this kept on staying constant. So hopefully this gives you a very clear view of the difference between absolute and relative cell reference. Okay. The other thing, you don't need to really use this function at all, but you might find it useful. In some cases, people are doing several types of manipulation. And it's hard to tell, is it like a string or is it a date or something like that? So if you want to do certain things where you definitely want to make sure you're comparing a date, you would do something like this. So you would say date value, and then you can see the text here, right? So let's say I did the 1-1. Keep on forgetting to put quotes in here. Okay. Let's see, why is that? Why did that happen? Let's see here. Date value. And if I had this set like that. Okay, hold on a second here. And then I set that to be date. There we go. Okay, so if I'm doing something, I'm converting it from a string. Yeah, let me change this back to date. And then this is date, which is good. This is date, and I need to say, there we go. Okay, so like I said, you can see I set this to be a string here, right? By me putting quotes around it, it's a string, okay? And then I put the date value on it, and all that does, it just makes sure that I'm working with a date. So within the cell, and it kind of displays it as a date, that's one thing, which is fine. You can see that here. But this is more for when you're doing calculations and stuff. You want to make sure you're comparing one date to another date. You want to make sure that Excel understands it to be a date, okay? Like I said, you really don't have to worry too much about it. But in case you're doing some stuff with dates, that's a good thing to kind of remember. Otherwise, you end up with screwy values like I just had a second ago. Okay. All right. So hopefully all of the stuff I just covered gave you a good view of like how to use if, how to do the and or not, and the difference between absolute and relative cell reference, right? So remember this part here, right, with the multiple logical conditions. And remember the absolute and relative cell reference here. Okay, so hopefully everyone found this useful, and we'll start new lectures for Excel this weekend. Thank you.